Today, we are going to learn about a significant chapter from Class 12 Economics, Indian Economy on the Eve of Independence. This chapter helps us understand how the Indian economy looked just before we got independence in 1947 and how deeply colonial rule had impacted it. Let's begin our journey back in time. Before British rule, India was not just a land of kings and empires, but also a hub of flourishing trade and craftsmanship. Before British colonial rule, India had a prosperous and self-sustaining economy. It was especially known for its flourishing handicrafts, including cotton and silk textiles, metalwork, and precious stone industries. But with the arrival of the British, everything started to change. India was reduced to a mere supplier of raw materials for British industries. This led to the destruction of Indian handicrafts, a decline of agriculture, and a severely weakened economy. The British made no efforts to build a modern industrial foundation in India. Let's now explore just how backward India's economy became under colonial rule. India's per capita output during the first half of the 20th century grew by less than 0.5% annually. Handicrafts declined rapidly with the influx of British manufactured goods. Agriculture stagnated despite being the livelihood of the majority. Economists like Dadabhai Nauroji and V.K.R.V. Rao tried to estimate national income as the British made no effort to measure India's economic progress. But what kind of policies brought about such economic damage? Let's take a look at the nature of British economic policies. The main goal of British policies was economic exploitation. India was turned into a supplier of raw materials. British goods flooded Indian markets, destroying local industries. India became a market for British exports and a source of cheap raw materials like cotton and jute. This system benefited Britain immensely while draining India's wealth. Among all sectors, agriculture was the most heavily affected. Let's examine what went wrong. About 85% of India's population was dependent on agriculture, yet it remained stagnant. Key reasons included the zamindari system, where profits went to landlords, not cultivators. High revenue demands led to exploitation. Outdated techniques and lack of irrigation kept productivity low. To make things worse, agriculture was commercialized. Farmers grew cash crops like cotton, not food. There was little investment by both the government and farmers. This led to rural poverty, famines, and unrest. Now let's shift our focus to the industrial sector, which barely made any progress during colonial rule. India's industrial potential remained largely untapped. British policies aimed at deindustrializing India. Traditional handicrafts collapsed. Initial industries like cotton and jute emerged in the late 1800s. There were a few notable developments, but they were not enough. The Tata Iron and Steel Company was established in 1907. However, there was no growth of capital goods industries like tools and machinery. The public sector only supported colonial needs such as railways, ports, and power. Overall, industrial growth was very limited and unequal. What about foreign trade? Let's take a closer look. India experienced a constant export surplus. Raw materials like indigo, cotton, and jute were exported, while finished goods were imported from Britain. The direction of trade was heavily skewed in Britain's favor. The Suez Canal, opened in 1869, reduced transport costs and tightened British control. Next, we move to the demographic profile of India under British rule, which reflects the human cost of economic neglect. India's first census was conducted in 1881. It showed extremely low literacy, below 16%, with female literacy just 7%. High infant mortality, 218 per thousand births. Life expectancy, only 32 years. Widespread poverty and disease. 1921 is known as the year of Great Divide in population growth. India's population grew slowly but remained unhealthy, uneducated, and impoverished under colonial rule. Now let's talk about the occupational structure. How were people employed in British India? Some regions like Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and West Bengal saw a shift towards industry and services. But others like Punjab and Rajasthan remained heavily dependent on farming. Around 70 to 75% of the population was in agriculture. Only 10% was in manufacturing and 15 to 20% in services. How was the infrastructure during this time? Was it developed to help India? Let's find out. Infrastructure was developed not for Indian welfare but to serve British interests. Railways starting from 1850 helped transport raw materials, not people. Roads were built mainly for army movement. Waterways were underdeveloped and uneconomical. Even modern communication systems were introduced with control in mind. Posts and telegraph were used to control the Indian population. Modern banking and education were started, but mainly to assist British administration. Despite their scale, these developments did not uplift the Indian people. So, what was the state of India's economy by the time we gained independence in 1947? By 1947, India's economy was in ruins. Agriculture was overburdened, industries were underdeveloped, and infrastructure served foreign rulers. The British drained India's wealth, left widespread poverty and unemployment, and made little contribution to building a self-reliant economy. But independence was not just the end of colonialism, it was the beginning of rebuilding. India's post-independence journey had to begin with massive rebuilding through planning, development of industries, and reforms in agriculture and trade. And with that, we conclude our exploration of India's economy on the eve of independence.